My name is Harrison Wheeler, and this is Technically Speaking. Randall Wilson is my guest on this episode. I found the title Becoming a Master Builder fitting because he's well on his way to achieving Lego Master Builder status, which we'll get into later on the show. He also builds brands, has a background in architecture, manages a design team at Capital One, and he's the co-founder of the Hue Design Summit. We'll have a discussion on how all of these things interplay with each other, and I'll seek his wisdom, observations, challenges, and advice on how to execute a vision from the designer's lens.
Following the joy. And that doesn't mean going in a linear path, right? Like I can do this Hue Design Summit over here. I can do this Lego thing over here. I can work in corporate America up there. These things aren't connected per se, but the core element is me because that's where my joy is.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Technically Speaking, a podcast about the human experience. On this episode, I'm bringing on Randall Wilson II, who currently resides in Chicago. He's a user experience manager at Capital One, and he's a co-founder of the Hue Design Summit that just took place this summer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. How you doing, Harrison?
Between the stuff that's been happening in Wisconsin, which is my home state.
Yeah.
I grew up in Milwaukee, which isn't too far north of Chicago.
Yeah, I was going to say not too far from me.
Yeah. So that stuff kind of really hits home in that sense. And then we've been dealing with the fires for the past couple of weeks. And so
How close are you?
6-9 miles out, but it's just been a wall of smoke. The air quality hasn't been that great. And maybe 2 days ago was sort of the first day that we could see the sun without it being filtered by like a film of smoke. So
I hope you and your peoples in San Jose and, back in Wisconsin doing okay.
But yeah, how are you doing?
It's like you mentioned, we just finished the Hue Design Summit, so we're on extended break right now. And I'm taking the time to really give myself grace. I usually am I work around the clock just on different efforts. Like if it's not work, then it's Hue Design Summit. If it's not that, then it's, the most incredible effort, the hip hop Lego stuff I'm doing. If it's not that, it's something else. So I'm trying to like sit down and, and take a day every day. So,
you started out in architecture, you were doing a bit of coding, then you transitioned that to graphic design. You've got UX, you're working on becoming a Lego master builder. And you've got the Hue Design Summit. So what is the motivation behind all of that? Like, how did you find yourself sort of getting a taste of different things, and what has that led to?
Well, I one of the first memories I have of my life is waking up and going to the dining room table in my parents' apartment in 1990 and playing with a Lego set. So I think that's really when my life started. I was 4 years old. I won't forget, it was in Decatur, Georgia, because I'm from the A. I don't know if that popped up anywhere in your search, but that's important. So, So I think from there, my creative nature led me to different things. It, connecting Lego all the way to finding a specific diploma in high school that would allow me to major in architecture in college. And then being in college and visiting Chicago for the first time, that really lit up the imagination I had to just see, what craft looks like applied well. Method up,
Is that from like a architecture perspective?
Yeah.
Like, what was that?
Yeah, okay. I think that's what it was, right? Because I've still been playing with Lego to that point. So to just see what I was majoring in and all these buildings and these architects that we studied, to see the work that has stood the test of time. Also, I'm reading currently Devil in the White City, and part of that, half of that book is about Burnham and Root, right? That architecture firm, and some of those buildings are still here.
Yeah.
Just seeing the end goal at the time, because
Hmm.
I eventually came to the point practically where I was about to graduate and somehow did not realize that I needed to get a master's degree in architecture as well as the bachelor's.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, I think I'm done. I think I'm tired of this. So,
Was it a money thing, or
oh
were you
yeah,
just not,
oh yeah,
okay.
unapologetically, yeah. It was like, wow, I have to do all of this, and then you get paid that
Yeah.
after all of this. I
Mm,
don't think so. I
right.
loved it, but I also fell out of love with it as far as
Yeah.
practicing it while I was in college. So
Mm,
decided to pivot, because at the same time I was doing graphic design for campus organizations. You know, everybody, people that are
right.
doing flyers, everybody knows
Right.
that journey. So
I know that
yeah,
game.
right. So was
Rites of passage.
rite of passage, right? Crossing the sand, as it were. So like I did that, and then at the same time, shortly after graduating, friends of mine that were getting into music needed a website. And so that's when I learned how to code, getting my hands dirty into that, and then
Mm,
parlay that into an email design internship, and then arrived at where I'm at now with Capital One as a UX designer.
mm, yeah. Yeah. So, what keeps you at a company for 9 years?
I am currently, fun fact, as of this recording, the longest tenured black designer in my department.
Wow. Congrats.
Yeah,
Congrats.
and I'm not that old. So I started basically when I was a kid. So what keeps me there?
Yeah.
I would say, I'm sure you're aware of the concept of people not leaving jobs; they leave managers.
Right.
So I've been fortunate and lucky to have managers that
Mm,
can still challenge me, that teach me, that advocate for me in rooms
mm,
that I'm not in,
right.
and allow me to grow the way I want to grow, and facilitate that. And so these are the
Right.
lessons that I've captured and perpetuated in me managing people at work too.
Mm.
So that's what happens. That's what leads to me being there for a decade almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know kind of how the tech world is. You get 4
Mhm.
years, you're a dinosaur. 2 years, a lot of
Mhm.
folks start looking. So,
Mhm.
so much has changed, but I think to understand, I myself as a manager, I don't think you're going to get to the place of being able to make an impact if you're not at a company for more than 2 years, right? Because you're just kind of learning everything, in the first 2 years alone. So I want to go to you being in Atlanta and the music influence, and you were talking about sort of like the hip hop Lego, like tell me a little bit about that, because I think it's a different angle that we don't hear too much,
Yes.
and I'm a big fan of Atlanta music.
Man, I could let me see if I can truncate it and make it succinct. So, as I mentioned before, grew up with
Yeah,
Lego, still have Lego in my apartment. 30 been playing with Lego for 30
yeah,
years. Friend of mine from New York, Sarita Gates. I know her through one of my co-founders of the Hue Design Summit, Alfonso Jordan. He also went to college with
yeah,
me. And I guess
okay,
she was just asking around, like, who do you know anybody that knows how to uh, you know, build Lego, or, anybody that's skilled with it. And he just so happened to know me. And so we connected, and she's like, yo, I want to do some hip hop Lego stuff. And and so her being from
okay,
New York, the cradle of hip hop, right?
yep,
But
yep,
also me being from
yeah,
the A, where hip hop, you could arguably say, was centered in the early 2000s
2000s on lock.
on lot. And also, for the people that aren't familiar, me growing up in Atlanta in the early 90s and mid 90s, when you had Raheem, Kilo Ali, you had and
Mm,
for me growing up, hearing, I probably wasn't supposed to listen to this at the time, 3 6, like
right,
so I'm
right,
familiar with being in a city that is at the center of a culture, just like she is. So there was commonality and a vernacular that we could speak to each other. So combining, the culture of hip hop with the toy, some people think of it as Lego, but also as an art medium. There's disparate connections that I think, disparate worlds that you can connect with those, with a simple unit being a brick, right? That's a common word that floats through both worlds, and just seeing what you can unlock, and not only just remake in Lego, but what you can then provide commentary on through a brick. So that's what we're exploring currently.
The project was started with, was it a partner that you began Hue Design Summit with?
Yes. So myself, Alfonso Jordan, Tiffany Ricks. Alfonso and Tiffany mentioned something about they had a separate conversation about it, like doing a retreat. And Zoe and myself started talking about what would it look like if we were to start an agency to serve Black-owned businesses in the area of Atlanta. And so all three of us, I think, got in a room, digital room on GroupMe, and just started talking about, what would it look like to have a Black-centric retreat for designers that is not typical and not representative of a lot of the Black events that we've had then and now. How can we add to the ecosystem, basically?
And it looked like it started in a living room, right? Like, tell me that story.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I think is rewarding about being in this diaspora is the communal aspect of how we communicate, we grow up, that we share information, and sometimes it doesn't happen. It's not facilitated in the best way in like a classroom or a sterile setting. I think in the tradition of passing information down from generation to generation through the spoken word, through art, just being in a place where, let's say we can get together at somebody's house and talk about design stuff, talk about best practices, talk about our experiences, talk about things that we know that aren't necessarily represented in the textbook, that we can share and give people a leg up on where they are and what journey they want to go down. So yeah, it started in a living room.
When was the first conference? A couple years ago, 3 years ago?
First conference was in 2017. And here, the interesting context about that is, if you remember, that was the same year that Fire Festival happened.
Yep. Wow. Also, wow.
Yes.
How did that feels like forever ago, by the way.
It does. It does. It is something that we kept in mind as we planned this conference, and said, yo, if as long as we're not as bad as that, we okay. Now, granted, even though we had that backdrop, we only had like 3 designers come.
Yeah.
But you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And so 2 out of the 3, the third one is like my best friend. He still attends. 2 out of the 3 ended up becoming part of the collective.
Okay.
So for the first one came from New Mexico in fashion design, and then the other one was a friend of Tiffany's. And so they become a part of this group of people that are putting these experiences together for the community.
And how has that community grown from 2017? We'll end the in-person version in 2019, and then I want you to kind of talk about the more virtual experience and how that sort of transformed. As I like to call it, was the unconference of your unconference.
I know, right? Yeah, sweatpant conference, basically. The way that it grew, we utilized some of our, the networks that we're naturally a part of. We have a Black in Design GroupMe that we had started a couple years ago that Alfonso, I think, started. And we just, spread the word in there. We mentioned, I think in 2018, that we were coming back, and we partnered with African American graphic designers group. Shout out to Terrence. So we shared the event with his network, and then from there, I think it just spreads once the word spreads and people understand that, yes, this is not like a typical conference that you've gone to. It is supposed to be smaller and more intimate than other spaces, so that you can connect with people. And because one of the things that I believe in, and Sarita does too, and everybody that I think we work with, is relationships are important. Not to be self-serving, but more just so you can learn from somebody, that you can build with somebody over time. And so to do that, we focus on the environment being more contained and not having 100, 200, 250 people in a room, where you just are really only able to absorb the information coming at you, but not being able to talk to the person right next to you. So to go to the virtual experience, and not having that number necessarily being a direction that we'd have to follow, we wanted to be more inclusive and make sure we got students that aren't from pedigreed schools, whatever that means, right? That's a loaded concept. So making sure that we got college students. We even got a couple folks from high school that were graduating, that were early in their design journey, along with people that are well established in their careers, and making sure that we made time for people who talked, or made time for people who presented, to also come back and talk to people that were interested in that design discipline. So people that may have spoken to user experience or industrial design, having those breakouts afterwards, and having that that group of 10 to 15 people to ask more in-depth questions, just like what happens at the physical summit. I think we were able to translate that one-to-one.
Yeah, because I think from what I saw this year, you had Cheryl Miller, who's been working in the graphic design space for quite some time, a historic figure, living legend. Then you had Regine, who was actually on one of my past shows, having a conversation around accessibility. You had the CEO of Gravity Sketch, was 3D. You had designers talking about brand design, how logos can make an impact. So a really wide variety of topics. And I think it's important because it allows you to just pull in inspiration from a number of these different areas. What drives inspiration for you, and like what currently kind of has you intrigued?
And I have a short list. I'm just going to run through them. Data viz / infographics. I've been interested in that. The concepts of decolonizing design and intersectionality. And some wild cards being Japanese city pop, Korean crime dramas, and video game history. Because I also am a retro game collector. So
there's a new Netflix special out. Have you caught that one? It's on
High Score.
There we go.
I was watching it last night.
I was like, okay, I know you probably already watched it already.
Oh yeah, it's it's the game design and the world of how UX applies to that. It's something that I think drives my interest in video games, because not only was I playing with Lego at the age of 4, I was also playing Nintendo. So these things kind of connect. And fun fact, Lego just came out with a Nintendo Entertainment System set. So worlds collide.
So you mentioned Korean crime drama. What are you watching right now? And what is it about?
Bad Guys, which is about these 3 convicts, and a detective is letting them out of jail and having them solve crimes to reduce their sentences. Starting to watch Stranger, Kingdom from a couple years ago, which is more zombie based. But I draw from other cultures, like anything across the world.
Yeah.
Which is why you heard me say city pop from Japan.
Yeah.
Just taking different aesthetics and understanding
Right.
what that means, and what significance that has, and how it shows up in design is how I read,
Yeah.
different forms of art.
And you mentioned something around decolonization of design. What are you currently reading to learn more about that?
There's a book, a book of parts called Cross-Cultural Design. So really understanding
Hmm.
what design represents and what it signifies in different cultures. If you can imagine what, this westernized, Eurocentric curriculum of design looks like in India or
Hmm.
Singapore or Africa or, and
Mm.
somewhere in Brazil, what the history of these cultures um,
Yeah.
mean and how they interpret it, and how you should really understand who you're designing for and what not to do, and how to better imbue your work with understanding and
Yeah.
that awareness. Because again, being in architecture,
Mm.
what would it have looked like if what my art history class was comprised of work primarily from Africa or Asia or South America, and not just,
Right.
the Parthenon and the Pantheon and all of these things. And
Mm.
uh, even my
Mm.
architecture building on campus is built in the style of the Bauhaus from Europe, right? So really understanding
Yep.
what I've been
Yeah.
learning and
Yep.
how I'm trying to unlearn at the same time. So in some of this work, I'm learning from Dr. Leslie Ann Noel, who spoke at a previous Hue Design Summit. So really just kind of following her lead and learning from her and many other people in this space. Oh, and Dr. Dory got a shout out. It sounds like I'm dropping names, but I'm really just showing love. Like these are people that are doing a lot of work and that I'm listening
Yeah.
to.
And by the way, many of the folks and resources that you're shouting out, I'll actually link on the website and in the podcast so folks
Hmm.
can learn a little bit more and educate themselves.
Yes.
All right. So here's the big question. We set the show up with you becoming or striving to become a Lego master builder. How could you metaphorically relate that to the work that you currently do, or at least the experiences that you've had in the past?
Lego Master Builders have to have a vision to be able to put discrete parts together to build a mass, a form that serves the public. In this context, it's art, but that kind of informs the way that I work and learn as a UX manager, UX designer, being able to
Mm.
see the many different parts that will comprise the experience and the product, and what's needed, what is the glue, right,
Mm.
to put those things together in the right way, in the right process, in the right patterns to work the way that people need them to work.
Mm.
So that's how I've thought of how these things connect and how I've been working.
I love it, man. Is there anything that you want to leave with the audience before we wrap up?
Find find the things that bring you joy, and keep that in your mind's eye if you can. I think a lot of my career has been following following the joy. And that doesn't mean going in a linear path, right? Like I can do this Hue Design Summit over here. I can do this Lego thing over here. I can work in corporate America up there. These things aren't connected per se, but the core element is me because that's where my joy is. So I would say follow your joy.
The master vision of the master builder. How could folks get in contact with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Randall Wilson II. You can find me on Instagram at the Rock Files, TheRockFiles, named after the album. If you're a fan of Rock the Mic, you know what album that is. Yeah, and I think that's it. So feel free to drop a line. I'll respond.
Enjoy this episode? Be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever podcast platform that you use. You can also subscribe to my newsletter at harrisonwheeler.com for the latest industry insights, new article posts, and announcements of future guests on the show. Once again, thanks for listening to this episode of Technically Speaking. I'm your host, Harrison Wheeler, and I'm out.